Chapter 13. L'Amour and Scud Missles. Sometime in late November, while trying to get the set list tight and come up with new song ideas, an argument broke out during rehearsal. As usual, it started about everyone's volume. DeVito started to complain that he couldn't hear Steve's guitar because Brendan was too loud. Then, Tommy started to complain that he couldn't hear himself singing anymore, etc., etc., etc.
I don't give a shit. Get the fucking amps off. We're in the studio. We're not in a fucking basement. We gotta hear.
The dynamic of the band before Brendan rejoined was always balanced. Steve was quiet, DeVito was loud, and Tommy and I were always just about having fun. This basically let DeVito do what he wanted to do without any contention. Once Brendan rejoined, it threw the weird balance that we had out of whack. The problem was that Brendan had a pretty obnoxious personality, and he was a bit of a know-it-all. This did not mix well with DeVito. And because they didn't mix well, my and Tommy's personalities got even louder. On this particular night, everything came to a head. DeVito's girlfriend Jeanette was there, and he wasn't going to stand for Brendan talking down to him. Finally, DeVito had had enough, and he threw his bass across the room and walked out. DeVito's bass had made a deep, giant bong sound as it crashed to the floor. Tommy quickly said, "Let's try that in key." Jeanette responded with, "You're such an asshole, Tommy," and ran after DeVito to try and calm him down. We laughed and just assumed that he needed a break for a few minutes and went to get some air. That wasn't the case this time. He never came back. We couldn't believe it. DeVito called me the next day and basically said he'd had enough and was quitting the band. I urged him to reconsider. We had a great thing going and we were on our way up, but he wasn't having it. We found out later that DeVito was frustrated that his songs weren't being used in Playground. He actually started to jam with another local band, Big Bad Wolf, with hopes of joining them. Playground immediately started looking for a new bass player. We auditioned a few guys and finally found our man in Richie Delfino. He was perfect. Not only was he a really good bass player, but his two favorite bands were Kiss and Black Sabbath. Tommy's favorite and mine as well. We were in heaven. Before we officially made him a member of the band, we wanted to get to know him a little bit better. We didn't want to have the same problem with personalities clashing like we did with DeVito. Tommy and I took Richie to hang out at the Crazy Country Club one night to see a few bands. We had such a good time and got along so well that we stayed after closing to jam with the owner. At this point, we were like royalty at the Crazy Country Club because of the massive crowds we were bringing in. After the late night blues jam, the owner gave us his approval to sign Richie on bass. The next weekend, we took Richie to Billy O's, back to the spot where we had played our very first show. We were once again treated like royalty. I'm sure it wasn't because the owners loved hanging around with a bunch of kids. It was because we made these guys a small fortune every time we played their club. This time, Steve and Brendan were also there. By the end of the night, we all agreed we could officially welcome Richie into Playground. The owner of Billy O's also wouldn't let us leave without booking another date to play. We booked February 16th, 1991. Giving us about 2 months to get Richie ready. We all knew that 1991 was going to be the year of Playground. We began official rehearsals with Richie right away. To save money, we began rehearsing in the small drum room in my house. The room was actually so small that the other band members would have to stand in the hallway while I was inside playing the drums. Every once in a while, Steve and Tommy would sneak down into my kitchen where my mom always had something cooking on the stove. They would run back up with meatballs, chicken cutlets, or whatever they can get their hands on. This was all going on while I was in the room waiting to start the next song. I could hear Tommy trying to sing the next song with a mouthful of meatballs. We knew that once New Year's was over, we would need to start gigging heavily again, so we began rehearsing a few times a week. Come to think of it, Steve and Tommy might have called for that many rehearsals just so they could eat my mom's cooking a couple times a week. Those bastards. The band was invited to a New Year's Eve party at Tommy's friend Richie O'Brien's house. The party was filled with everyone that typically came to one of our shows. It was a very fun and relaxing atmosphere. Brendan and I were drinking in the kitchen while Tommy and Richie were hanging out in the basement. A little after midnight, we heard a loud ruckus coming from the basement. Tommy came bolting up the stairs and ran out of the front door. Seconds later, Richie came up bleeding heavily from the nose and over his eye. He was yelling, "We have to get out of here! We have to get out of here!" Brendan and I grabbed Richie and got the hell out of there without even knowing what had just happened. Richie told us that Tommy and a guy named Erkan had an argument and it came to blows. Because the basement happened to be filled with all of Erkan's crew, Tommy, Richie, and a few other friends of Tommy's who were down there didn't stand a chance. Not only were they heavily outnumbered, but because Richie was the new guy and nobody really knew who he was, both sides were hitting Richie during the melee. Poor Richie. Only in the band for a few weeks and getting utterly destroyed by both opposing sides in a pretty big fight. Tommy and Richie went to the hospital that night and both were in pretty bad shape. The whites of Tommy's eyes were dark red for weeks. He looked like one of the lizard people out of the old 80s TV show V. I'm not sure how Richie looked after that night because I never saw him again. He came to my house the next day to pick up his amp when I wasn't home, and that was the last we ever heard from him. Playground once again stalled. First, Steve's chickenpox slowed down our unbelievable momentum, and now we had 2 bass players quit inside of a month. We had a show booked in February, and we needed to find a bass player fast. One afternoon while I was up in my room reading comics, the doorbell rang. I glanced out my window and saw the car of our former bass player, Brian DeVito. I quickly ran downstairs and told my mom to say I wasn't home. I hadn't seen him since he quit the band, and I wanted to see what he wanted before I spoke to him. I ran back up to my room while my mom answered the door. I heard her say, "Hi, Brian. Joey's not home." Brian asked, "Can I come in and talk anyway?" This wasn't that unusual. Because we used to rehearse in my room, my mom became very friendly with all the guys in the band. Tommy would sometimes talk to my mom and my grandmother about his ex-girlfriend, Erin, sometimes for 2 hours while we rehearsed upstairs. My mom kindly welcomed DeVito in and sat him on the couch as if to begin a therapy session. They began talking in the living room while I listened in the upstairs hallway. Brian began saying how he thinks he made a big mistake leaving Playground and that he misses all of us. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. After how he walked out, I never thought that was why he was coming to see me. If I had known, I would have answered the door. But it was too late now. I couldn't go downstairs and say, "Hi, I've been here the whole time." So I just stayed hidden in my room and kept listening. My poor mother and grandmother had to sit there for over an hour while Brian cried to them that he wanted back in the band. My mom and grandmother really became sort of Playground psychiatrists. Finally, Brian left and my mom screamed up to me, "He's gone, you bastard! Now you can come down!" She was just kidding. I knew my mom wasn't mad. She secretly loved being band mom. This was such a weird coincidence. Brian had no knowledge that we had just gotten a new bass player in Richie and that he had just recently quit. If Richie had still been in the band, I'm sure none of us would have cared what DeVito had to say. That wouldn't have been fair to Richie. But we were in sort of a bind at the moment. We had a show already booked and had no leads on finding a new bass player. I quickly called the other guys to fill them in what had just transpired. They were laughing hysterically about the fact that I was hiding upstairs while poor DeVito cried to my mom and grandmother. But we all unanimously agreed that we should take DeVito back. Playground finally played its first show as a 5-piece band, both Brendan and Steve on guitar now, on February 16th, 1991 at Billy O's, the same place we started 6 months prior. Now, and after only 6 months, we were a completely different band. Not so much musically, but mentally. We were very confident and borderline cocky now. We knew the clubs wanted us because we brought so many people, and we decided that we weren't going to get screwed out of money anymore. We worked out what they call a door deal. That's when the band gets a portion of every ticket sold at the door. This was the first show where we actually made decent profit. It wasn't anything incredible, but it was something around $150 per person. Considering I was only 17 years old, this was great money for me. Of course, we blew it all once we got back to Brooklyn. We invited everyone that was at our show to come party with us at our favorite spot, the Cuckoo's Nest. We walked in and slapped all of our money on the bar and said, "Drinks are on us for the rest of the night." If memory serves correct, Ernie ordered 100 beers from the bartender that night, all at once. Picture 100 beers on the bar. Unbelievable. It was our way of saying thank you to all of our fans. Playground was back. Tommy's house at this point became exactly like the one in the movie Animal House starring John Belushi. It was 24/7 partying. We even paid his rent one month with beer can returns. That's a lot of beer. Ernie decided to tell a few Asian girls that were in attendance the night of Billy O's that he was the band's manager and that we were all having a big party back at the band house in Brooklyn. Those poor girls were stuck in Brooklyn for almost a week. I think all the raunchy details involving Playground could warrant its own book. Maybe I'll write it one day and change some of the names to protect the innocent. It might be more in line with Motley Crue's The Dirt Book. Playground began booking as many shows as possible. There was a great buzz around the neighborhood about us, and we wanted to keep the party rolling. Next, we would be returning to the Crazy Country Club on St. Patrick's Day. It was another amazing sold-out show that created even more hype about the band. Everyone now knew that if you wanted to have a good time, come to a Playground show. I'm not sure if we really appreciated what we had accomplished back then. What we created at our live shows was not only a great performance, but an incredible party atmosphere. But because we were so young, we were always looking ahead for the next big opportunity, and it came shortly after St. Patrick's Day. We heard that the legendary rock club L'Amour was closing soon, but before it did, it was hosting a giant battle of the bands called the Scud Battle of the Bands, referring to the Scud missiles the Iraqi military were using against the U.S. military in the Gulf War at the time. We quickly submitted for an entry. L'Amour was absolutely the biggest rock club around. Every major signed band had played there, including Metallica, Motley Crue, Twisted Sister, just about everybody. I just recently saw Anthrax, Skid Row, Badlands, and Mr. Big at L'Amour. The biggest and best show I'd ever seen at L'Amour was when Paul Stanley from Kiss did a small solo tour. That was also the first time I saw future Kiss drummer Eric Singer play live. To play that stage, the same stage that I just saw Paul Stanley on, would be a dream come true. This was a far way off from playing in front of Whitney Houston's manager just a few months prior. When you're a kid, there are always times when you say to yourself, if I do that, I've made it. Or if I can just play there, I've made it. When I was 15 or 16 years old, if a person played L'Amour, he'd made it. Truth be told, I knew when people said you've made it that it really meant nothing. It was really more in their eyes than mine. It was just an event or a milestone that validated what you were doing in someone else's eyes. I just wanted to play my drums all the time. To me, that was making it. Doing big things and playing great shows is the easy part. It's when things are hard that a person really sees who wants to stick with it and who doesn't. Even though playing L'Amour was the opportunity of a lifetime, we quickly saw that it was just another way for a club to make money. They didn't care who played the Battle of the Bands. They didn't even ask for a demo tape. All the band had to do was purchase 100 tickets at $5 a ticket and they could play. In essence, the band had to pay them $500 to play. This was the beginning of the pay-to-play era of music. Clubs were beginning to make bands pay them to play at their clubs. L'Amour told us that we could sell the tickets at whatever price we wanted. We knew that we could easily sell 100 tickets at least $10 each, so we would make money in the process. So we agreed. This being the world-famous L'Amour, we knew we would be able to bring a lot of people. We had to pull no punches. We set out to have the biggest show of our lives. The next month consisted of non-stop promotion and rehearsal for the show. Every second of every day was focused on winning that battle of the bands. We worked day and night. When we weren't rehearsing, we were out promoting to every person that would listen. We did a whole new photo shoot to use on flyers that we would pass out and plaster all over town. Our Letters of the Sandbox newsletter mailing list had grown so big that we couldn't hand deliver anymore. Even after all these years and thousands of shows played, I think Playground at Lemoore was the hardest I had ever worked to put on any single show. Nothing was going to stop us from winning. It wasn't only about the $1,000 prize that we planned on using for our new demo. It was also the prestige of playing Lemoore and winning their Battle of the Bands. We knew this was going to catapult us to the next level. We were given the third slot out of 8 bands. We were all to use Lemoore backline equipment. We weren't allowed to bring anything because they wanted the bands to turn over quickly. I personally hated this. I was still at the point in my drumming evolution where I was extremely particular on how I played my drums. Luckily for me, the band with which we played our very first show, Naked Gypsy, was on right before us. Our friend Rocky, whose garage we used to audition our bass player DeVito, was now the drummer in Naked Gypsy. I was the one that set up his audition, so he kind of owed me a favor. I asked him if I could set the drums up exactly the way I wanted to play when he played, so I didn't have to change them over right before Playground went on. This worked out great. Now, I wouldn't have to run out and adjust stuff right before Playground went on. Remember, I'm a firm believer of the mystery and magic feeling of when a band first walks onto stage. We also loved going on after Naked Gypsy because we didn't think they were very good. The crowd also knew what time slot we had, so as soon as Naked Gypsy finished their set, the audience started to come alive. I can still feel the energy that was in the air that night. Lemoore was as crowded as when I saw Paul Stanley play there. The crowd began to chant, "Playground, playground, playground." More than 2/3 of the audience was there to see us. Finally, the DJ introduced us.
All right, folks, check it out. For $1,000 cash, let's have a big Brooklyn welcome for Playground.
When I got up on the drum riser and took the throne, where so many amazing famous drummers had played before me, a now very familiar sensation came over me. I became very calm. The crowd fell silent, and everything began to slow down. I was experiencing another frozen moment. This was a very pivotal moment in my music career, and my mind and body stopped my surroundings so I could enjoy it for a brief moment in time. I looked out over the sea of people in the audience, filled with my family, my friends, and smiled like I had never smiled before. After a long, deep breath, I was back in real time. The crowd was the loudest I'd ever heard. We pounded into our opening song, Could Have Been You, and followed it with the upbeat poppy, Get Your Hands Away From My Girl. We had our tight 30-minute set down to a science for this show. The high-energy Silver Lining was next, and the crowd loved it. Then we did something no other band did that night. We slowed the set down with an amazing ballad called Some Things Never Change.
Sunshine's turned to gray since you've gone away and left me here. You left me here. There's never a reason why people say kiss and tell. They make your life hell as you're loving them. Yes, I'm still loving you. What am I supposed to do now that our love has gone astray? The pain keeps it rocking all through the night and rolling through the day, singing some things never change, and I wish it wasn't true. Some things never change. There's just no forgetting you. As strange as it sounds, and I know it sounds strange, but some things never change. Despite what you hear, it's like a clown with a tear. He paints his face so none can see the pain and misery that's burning inside. As time passes by, he's like you and I. Yeah, he's like you and I. And some things never change, and I wish it wasn't true. Some things never change, yeah. There's no forgetting you. Some things never, never, never change. as it sounds. And I know it sounds strange, but some things never, ever change.
This did not calm the crowd down at all. They loved this song and they loved us. Their energy never wavered. After the ballad, Tommy yelled, "We got one more for you." We blasted into our closing song, "I Don't Care," and the crowd got even crazier. Once finished, Tommy yelled, "Thank you, good night." I know it's cliche to say, but it felt like the crowd was going to blow the roof off Lemoore when we finished. We were later told that we had brought in the most people for any unsigned band in the history of Lemoore. Wow. The DJ couldn't believe it either. He yelled over the microphone, "Let's hear it for Playground." Wow, that good, huh? $1,000 to them. Then he paused, realizing that the battle wasn't over and he couldn't declare us winners just yet. He covered his mistake by saying, "That's the $1,000 question."
All right, Brooklyn, let's hear it for Playground. Yeah, that good, huh? Not fucking bad. $1,000 good. That's the $1,000 question on everybody's mind.
We walked off knowing we had won. Nobody could top what we just did. This was one of the best feelings I've ever had. Knowing how much hard work we put into this show and then seeing it all pay off and hearing that amazing reaction by the crowd was pure ecstasy. There was only one thing to do while we waited. Go to the bar and celebrate with our friends and family while the last few bands performed. After that, they would officially announce Playground as the winners. While we were celebrating at the side of the bar in Lemoore, everyone was coming over to congratulate us. People couldn't believe that the DJ already actually announced Playground as the winners. Mistakenly, of course. The next few bands were both just average. The final band, Mr. Strange, had a really good bass player that was kind of showing off a lot. They had no good songs, and the crowd was completely dead ever since we finished our set. Once the final band finished, the DJ came over the microphone and said, "Okay, everyone, the judges are backstage tallying their votes. We will announce the winner shortly." The crowd once again began to chant, "Playground, Playground, Playground." Moments later, he came back out onto the stage to officially announce the winner. He began by saying, "First, we want to thank all the bands that participated. We have an unbelievable crowd here tonight, and you should all be proud." I was thinking to myself, yeah, we are proud. The crowd is all ours. He continued, "This was a tough decision, but we have a winner." The crowd began to chant again, "Playground, Playground, Playground." Still, he continued, "The winner of the Moore's Scud Battle of the Bands is Mr. Strange." Our mouths hung open in shock. I actually thought they were about to say, "Just kidding, Playground!" I waited and waited, but the joke kept going. We couldn't believe it. The crowd went ballistic, booing and throwing things at the DJ and the stage. I saw Tommy storm off, mad beyond belief. I was still in shock. This was just unbelievable. We had just pulled off the greatest show we could ever put on at the greatest rock club ever, and it didn't matter. We lost. We were devastated. The man on the stage said on the mic, "If someone from Playground can come backstage, we want to talk with them for a moment." Wait, I thought, what was this all about? We quickly assigned Brendan to go backstage to see what was happening. After about 15 minutes, Brendan came back out to fill us in on what they said. He said the promoter explained that Lemoore was closing soon, but they were opening up a new club called The Cabaret. They wanted us to play on their opening night because we did such a great job tonight. We later learned that Mr. Strange paid more money to be part of the battle, basically buying their win. But the promoter knew that they could make money off of us because of our crowd. In hindsight, I wish we would have just said, "Sure, we'll play your new club if you declare us the winners. Otherwise, forget it." Once again, a lesson learned. It all came down to money, not necessarily talent or hard work. After writing this book, some new information was brought to my attention. Brian DeVito, Playground's bass player, mentioned to me that one of the Lemoore judges named Joe Bravo on the night of the Battle of the Bands had just broken up with his girlfriend. I said, "Yeah, so what? He was mad because he broke up with his girlfriend? That's why we lost?" "No," he said. He then informed me that the girl he broke up with, named Tanya, was currently dating our lead singer, Tommy, and she was in the audience that night cheering us on. Oh my gosh. So, take it for what it is. I have no actual proof, but there's a good chance that the judge sabotaged us because he was mad at our lead singer, Tommy, for stealing his girl. Now, it's just a conspiracy theory, but definitely some information that I never knew before writing this book. So, there's a chance Playground lost the Battle of the Bands at Lemoore, all because of Tommy. That bastard. Soon after, Tommy came back from the bathroom with his hand all bloody. Apparently, he was so angry over our loss that he punched the bathroom wall. Needless to say, the promoter offering us a show at the new club didn't make us feel any better. To show what we thought of the judge's decision, we decided to get up on stage, pull our pants down, and moon the promoter and the other bands as if to say, "Fuck you for screwing us over." Our fans loved this gesture and began cheering. Looking back, I always wondered if Playground had won the Lemoore Battle of the Bands, how different things could have been. I know it was only a $1,000 prize, but it was more about us putting our hearts and souls into something and coming up empty, all because the promoter took a bribe. This was a big lesson learned. It wasn't always about how hard a person worked or how good a musician was. It was knowing all of the ins and outs and schmoozing and networking with the right people that really gets a person where he wanted to go. Don't get me wrong, I'm still super proud of what we accomplished that night, and I do believe putting my heart and soul into something is a great thing. I just don't think it's the only thing. That Playground show at Lemoore is still one of my top 5 all-time favorite shows I have ever played in my career.